a lot of people were wondering, who in the world is this girl? Where did she come from? How in the world does she know what she knows? Back in 2014, I was working with a company, a factory called Wolf Forwarding and Company. It was America's oldest and rarest apparel factory in the United States. It started out in Boston in 1842 under opera singers, and it had moved to Virginia in 1970s, and then in 2014, just whenever Made in the USA was really going to be starting to take off, I was serving as their marketing specialist, which basically means I was the entire marketing department for a large scale manufacturing company, plus their sister affiliate brands, Sisterly Grace, Access Activewear, Main Street Dancewear Factory Store, and Companion Fabrics. And then we had the parent company, Wolf Forwarding. And my job was to do everything, to do the social media, to do all the vendor relations, to do all the trade show, working with the designers who usually would handle the trade show things. But we were trying to get our name out there. Now, the thing is, we only had $10 a month to work with because we didn't have the profit margins. Being that we did everything in-house except make the fabric, our profit margins were abysmal. And so we just did not have the money to compete when everybody else was outsourcing their production overseas. So my job was the impossible job of trying to market this company, bring it back into, hi, Larry. So bring it back into, into the black, if you would, so that we started seeing good profit margins and hopefully being able to use those profit margins to be able to market and all the things that we needed to do to compete with a lot of people that were starting to enter the industry, especially foreign companies that were entering the industry as well. And so that was my job. And I had $10 a month to do it. And I had to beg for that. It was, we were using a free email server, and it just wasn't going to hold our capacity under that free category. We needed about 20,000 and they only allowed 6,000. So this is how I know everything that I know about how to do marketing, how to get yourself out there with pennies a day, is because I've had to do it. Anyways, in 2014, just as we were ready to reestablish the name for ourselves, I had made the mistake of talking to the people because I wanted the people in locally to understand who this company was, since it had been there since 1970s. And it seemed like people locally didn't know who we were, and people in Australia did. And I had already established these great relationships in Australia, and they were also in Chicago and a bunch of other places. And I had established this great relationship with one of the dance studio, dance competition that was also brand new. And so we started having that relationship there. And I established a relationship with a magazine that had started out as gymnastics and was just getting into dance. So I had all these great relationships established that was going to bring us into where we needed to be. So going back to 2014, we had this catalog that was going to celebrate everything about this company. I had researched the entire history of the catalog or the company going all the way back to Boston, tracked down all the information. It was going to be in this catalog. We were super excited because we heard that we were getting investors for the first time. And we were using equipment that was basically 1970s. The customer service was handwriting their orders and then giving it to data entry to enter in. And of course, that was allowing delays and all kinds of human error that could happen. And we were shipping orders overseas at our expense for free because China was delivering us fabric that did not meet the saturation points that we required. And because the owner has such a high standard, well, I'm not going to have you join right now, but maybe later. Anyways, so they had such a high standard of production that they've recut the orders. And that, of course, gave a delay. And of course, if you ever did any research, I think all the complaints and stuff with Wolf Forwarding is gone. But they were cruel. They were brutal to the customer service. They blamed customer service for missing orders. They blamed for missing photo dates, missing recitals, and all of this was really costly for a Made in the USA company. This is what we were dealing with. So having this experience and then having the investors come in, we were super excited, and we didn't really understand what was going on. Our controller wasn't really brought into it. He had gone through a bank layoff just before, and he had an MBA and, brilliant man, but he wasn't brought in on it. And as a marketing specialist, the investors just kind of bypassed my office completely, which I thought was weird. I mean, if you're going to bring a company back into good standings, then you would want to meet the marketing person as soon as possible. But they avoided me as much as they could. And they acted really roguish and just kind of, whenever they didn't get their way, they started acting like that movie, Wolf on Wall Street. They acted like that. So being suspicious, I brought in the local press to just kind of start nosing around, and they started asking questions. And as soon as I did, these guys lost their mind, and they said all the things that you're not supposed to say in print, which is how we were able to get our last paycheck. But the things that I learned through that, they ended up being, I found out I think it was 4 years later, fraudulent investors who go in and they steal companies. So they convince owners to give them controlling portion of the interest of the company under a false pretense of salvation. And then they end up bankrupting the company. And that's what their intentions were. They were going to take everything, reduce it down to a 4-person operation in California, outsource the entire production, and run it like that. So they took I think it was a 125 person company, a family owned company, and was going to downsize it, outsource, and just take everything. So this is how it works. And so what they were intending on doing was to bankrupt the company and just claim that, I'm sorry, it was too big. There was nothing we could do. And while they're bankrupting it, they can liquidate the assets for their own profit. What certification, what degrees do I hold? So you wouldn't think anything of it if I told you right now, and I can get to that. But I have a master's degree in fine arts, and in fact, it's apparel engineering and also costume design. And what I'm trying to prove with my other things is that the costume design, not fashion design, which started I think in 1800s, but costume design, which started in 348 BC, is the theater engineers, and we are the people that take all the dreams and the nightmares and turn them into logistics and logical realities, tangible things. So there's nothing make-believe in what I did with my career or my degree, but because of the stigma of this degree, and it's being looked at by only the actors and the actresses and the people that are in the spotlight, and not the people who are actually making the magic happen with all the things that you would expect with engineers. That's my degree. And then I was able to find that marketing was an outlet for that, because of things I used to do on stage, all the complex analyzation, breaking down, selling the audience onto an idea, I could do with marketing a little bit easier without having to worry about billing everything. So, but I also, while I was working there, I did packaging. I redesigned their packaging so that their tutus were easier to ship. I did markers, where you have the markers and you have the cutting board. I assisted in the design department during the summer, and then I also served as their copywriter. So basically, I took all the costumes. We had a 400-page catalog, an 80-page catalog, 40-page catalog. I took all the costumes and put them into script, and then we did our own photo shoots in-house. It was a 3-week affair every year, from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening. And we had tons of people just come in. So I got that full experience as well. I mean, this was a full-scale manufacturing company that was so rare because they did everything in-house, everything except make the fabric, because it was too toxic. The synthetic fabric is way too toxic to make here and follow our EPA rules, or it was before the EPA started changing the rules and allowing the things that would be toxic to humans allowable. So this is why I know everything that I know, because not only is it part of my degree, but it's also part of my career. So anyways, the investors came in, they conned the owners, they kicked out the owners. The owners end up having to sue the investors under a different company because they were landlords under a different company, sued the owners to gain back their assets, which was a really weird case. And then the investors broke into the factory, stole the hard data, the hard drive, because, this is an old company and they didn't do like clouds and stuff like that. Everything was done on databases. And so they stole that and then ran the company in California as a shell company and stole all the customers' money for like a year. And so, of course, the people were upset and they just thought it was hoarding and they got a bad reputation. And I don't know whatever happened with that. I know that these guys were running a co-op, one of these little co-op things, because you track down their address and they're just this rinky-dink co-op. They took the same $5 million and shifted it to every company that they were screwing using B-shell accounts. So, all these things I've learned because when we did win our WARN Act case, so they gave us this paper that said, a week after they took over, and they let off half of the people the next day, the rest of us a week later. So my entire career was gone in a week after this happened. And so they gave us this paper and they said, this qualifies as your WARN Act notice, which requires you having 60 days for that. And we're like, well, that's kind of weird. So we won our WARN Act case, but then the courts told us that we had to find the money in order to get our judgment. So you have a bunch of factory workers who have absolutely no experience in this, no resources whatsoever, being told that we have to find the money of investors who just kicked us out of our factory. That's my experience into this whole world of fraud. So being that I felt like, I was the advocate for these workers, I worked with the Department of Labor trying to get, everything coordinated. The Department of Labor did not believe us. They took the investors' side. They said to the investors that they were going to close the company and all this stuff. And we found an Indeed ad that was posting a job the next day for that company that's supposed to be closed. And that's how we got our paycheck. I had gone to I wrote emails and wrote letters to the senators and all the people that were in that district, the politicians, begging them while this was happening to please help us. This is weird. Somebody come and help us. I thought you believed in Made in America and all this. And I think only one person that was actually the district rep gave us even a time of day, and it was his agent or his aide. But then nothing ever became of that. And so after the DOL said, the Department of Labor said, okay, we're going to close your case, I sent an email, which I was surprised it got through, to the governor of Virginia at that time, and get a letter in the mail from the commissioner saying, why am I getting this letter from the governor? We reopened your case. And the only reason he did is because we found the Indeed ad that said, look, guys, these guys are still in business. So this is how it happens. And nobody heard about this, even though Wolf Forwarding is one of America's oldest and rarest factories. Nobody heard about this because we're not big time. We were in the dance industry, but we're not big time. So it's like in the dance industry didn't know. We couldn't contact our customers telling them what was happening because everybody was just out. And so our head designer ended up going into a comatose state because we had just finished this grueling period of working on a catalog. We take 3 months and we work on a catalog production, and it's stressful and everybody is chipping in, everybody's getting things done. And we had just finished that last page of that catalog when this happened. So everybody was we were wiped. And then this happens, we're all out. We don't know what to do. Nobody is having our backs. Nobody is helping us. We all think that the owners were in on it, so we don't trust them anymore. We have no one to trust. And then you have that whole layoff thing that happens with depression and the feelings, you go through the stages of guilt. We're completely scattered. We don't know what's going on. And we've got these lawyers who's trying to help us with the WARN Act, but then we're told that we have to find the money. So what do you do? And then you've got people whose pensions are lost, and I never even had one. I mean, by the time I got into the factory, they weren't doing what things that they were doing 30 years ago. A lot of those things were cut. So I was just basically working paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, and I'm probably working that until I died. And even as a marketing specialist, I was only making $15 an hour, even though I was carrying that much weight of the company. We just didn't have the money. This is what real world made in the USA factories look like that are doing everything in house. Everything the politicians say that they want, this is what we were doing, and still being ethical and following the rules. It wasn't until 5 years later that I ran into the owners and and they were still distraught. They had lost everything. They were trying to sell off the assets in order to pay back the debts that they owed. They just lost everything. Here they had finally taken a chance on an investor because we were all excited that Made in the USA was coming back, and they lost everything. And what they did was the investors had divided the two brothers. One of them was overseas and the other one was separated. So they had them separated. And when that happened, they were able to corner the brothers and manipulate. And this is how I've learned everything that I have about fraudulent investing and how it works, because I had to use the investment markets as the only resources that I had. And I used Google. I found the names on the investment markets. Every time I tracked them all the way back to the companies that they had before, and established this pattern of coming into a company, gaining controlling interest using a false promise of salvation, the company completely going off the map for like a year. Like right after us, they went to a cruise line and did the same thing. And as soon as they took over this cruise line, you didn't hear anything from them for about a year. And that's what they would do. They would use penny stocks. So while this is happening, they would use also penny stocks. Then they would get all these investors on these penny stocks. And it would be dormant for about a year, maybe two. Just as long enough for all the weight to go off. They did it to, I think it's Wikitunes. And so I saw people that were upset there, and I even tried to reach out to them. But these investors, that's what they did. So they took the same 5 million, they showed that, we have $5 million, let us help you. And then they would shift that money from one B shell company to the next, to the next, to the next. And then they would go to Delaware or Denver, which has lax LLC creation rules, and they would just create a new LLC right there. And then they would repeat the same thing, create a new investment firm or venture firm, and then they would repeat the same scam over and over and over again. I lost track of them when they were in Japan. I thought they screwed up and screwed over the wrong people, got involved with that mafia over there. And then they showed up, I think, in Germany and then back in the US. So I think they're still doing the same thing that they did to us. But it's a really interesting experience that I went through. Yeah, exactly. So I took that, and one of the things that theater teaches you, it's a systematic analysis of human behavior across time periods and countries, which basically means that you can find patterns of behavior and track it. You strip down the labels and you find the things, you identify things for what they are, not for what people think they are, or the perspectives of them. So taking that experience and my degree and what I was trained to do, I was able to establish those patterns. And for the longest time, I just thought these guys were dumb, because how could you be so stupid in hiding your money trails when they're right there for anybody to see? And it wasn't until I started seeing what was going on today with fraudulent investors in real estate that I realized it's not so much that they're dumb, it's the fact that they can't hide their investments because they would be cutting off the investors. So because the investments are wide open, and they have to be, the only way they can hide it is with emotional distraction. Well, my degree taught me how to see through all gaslighting and illusions and psychological manipulation and that kind of thing. So for me, who can see straight through that and is looking at things that are measured, so your mass, your time, your distance, and things that are tracked, which is movement, I'm looking at it like through an engineer who can see right through the illusions and these perspectives, going, why can't anyone else see this? I mean, you can Google it and see it. You Google this name, or you go to their investor relations site, you get a full list of names, and you just track the names and see who they're connected to, which is what you can do. Fraudulent investors create a money trail, it's called. And if you look and you track the names, you're going to be able to connect this name to this name to this name to this name to this name. And before you know it, you start to see this entire web, a web of deception and a web of fraud. And I'm looking at it going, why can't anyone else see it? Now, I did have the experience that a lot of people don't have, and I have that training that a lot of people don't have. But I thought, surely our FBI agents who are mind hacking experts, they have that same similar training of being able to see through psychological manipulation and through the illusions, and they bust fraud. That's what they do, and they do it globally. So I'm like, why aren't they talking up? And I realized that there is a case out there through Dershowitz, his Epstein case, and also his Spitzer case. Because after all this happened, I went back to school. Even though I have a master's, I have a BS, I went back to school again as a paralegal to figure out, how can I teach other people, or what can I learn? What kind of laws can we make so this stops? And then I realized, we already have these security fraud laws that are supposed to prevent it, but nobody is enforcing it. So that was strange. But I was like, okay, through all of that, and then the fascination of law just being logical, everything about law is logical. I love policies because there's no she said, he said, it's just rules. This is what the rule said. Here's what you did. Did you do the action? Yes. Did it break the rule? Yes. Okay, you're done. I don't care why you did it. It's that, here's the action. Here's the other action. You compare the two actions. This says forbidden. You did it. This says the punishment. Okay, we're done. That's sort of like the law enforcement perspective. That's their mindset, not lawyers, but law enforcers. And so I'm like, these guys are logical. They're logistical. They don't, they don't care about the emotion part of it. So why aren't they speaking up? So the Epstein and Elliot Spicer case from 2008 actually restricted the FBI from being able to investigate crimes at a government level with government officials. And I'm like, well, that's weird. How can a case law of a lawyer restrict the FBI? And so when I saw that Trump and his administration were insisting upon Robert Mueller not being able to talk about things that were not covered in that report, I'm like, oh, okay, there it is. Because that FBI report was only covering the crimes before Trump became president. And it wasn't covering any of the crimes after he became president. And that seemed to be the thing everybody was missing. That little piece of the puzzle was after. And that's what they didn't want him to talk about. They censored him from talking about it and the hearings. They censored him to talking about it with the public. And so they kept restricting the FBI from being able to do the things that they do. And I saw it with the Kavanaugh case, with the sex crimes cases. Everybody was upset with the FBI because they weren't investigating to the full extent of their abilities, but they were not allowed to under Dershowitz, Spitzer case, and Epstein case. So now we started, and then I was like, okay, so that's why Dershowitz and this right-wing blogger insisted they won their case to unseal the Epstein case because they were trying to smear Mueller. But it backfired on them, which I thought was hilarious. And now instead of being able to smear Mueller and get him completely kicked out of the case, and for Russia, for whatever reason, to be able to get all their people off, now they had a problem where it was back, completely back. I can't even think of the word right now, but it just kind of slammed in their faces. So I thought that was pretty funny. But this is what I've been looking at and observing under this mindset, that because I'm not fooled by the illusions. I'm not fooled by the psychological manipulation or the neuroscience manipulation, whatever people are calling it, because that's what my industry was. It was a psychological motivation with propaganda, is what theater is. The audience will come to us and to our theater, and they will let us lie to you, but you allow it to happen. And that's the thing. That's the key. If you're going to do propaganda, it has to be at the audience's allowal, and they have to be willing to suspend that disbelief, knowing that that's what you're doing. If you try to do it, if you try to lie to people using that medium and they didn't give you that permission, and especially if you try to screw them over, that's not good. And so I'm looking at QAnon right now. So anyways, took all this and seeing what was happening, created a startup corporation because it's the only thing powerful enough to take down a corporate monarchy. And I've always been an advocate for the students. I started as an education advocate. I've been against the corporate education high-stake testing system for 20 years, since I was a guinea pig of that. Back in, I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and they just assumed we were stupid. And Virginia was the first to implement the high-stake test systems, and they used us as the guinea pigs to see, how dumb we were. But my class wasn't dumb. We were just very analytical and smart. So I've been watching these things and how these students have been used and abused, and that their education has been taken away, and how they've been programmed into thinking there's only one right answer to all the problems. And then seeing what was happening on the manufacturing side of it, understanding what was happening with overseas with the US corporations, and how they were manipulating the factories and ignoring the labor laws and exploiting the people overseas and justifying it and saying, well, if I didn't do it, then their families wouldn't eat. And then seeing the same thing happen here with West Virginia, the same kind of crap, that same excuse happening, seeing what's happening with the investors who go in and they steal companies like Sears Roebucks, who America's oldest retail establishment, that happened to them. They had investors who came in and said they were going to save the company, and they let it bankrupt, and now it's done. These things are what happens that kills jobs. This is the job killing thing. It's not job killing regulations of a factory. It's investors going in and stealing factories under false pretenses, stealing companies under false pretenses, and getting away with it is what kills jobs. That creates your layoffs. That creates your restructuring. That destroys families. I mean, once you're laid off, it is hard to get back in, especially when you've got no resources, and then you get into a medical crisis and all your money is going away, and your politicians are saying, well, we need to bring back Made in America. We need to bring back trade. We need to bring back high-skilled laborers, when the high-skilled laborers got laid off because the investors stole the companies. So this is what's happening. And we have to stop looking at the bottom. We have to start looking up at the top. This is where everything is happening. Everyone is up at the top who's committing these things now. We now have a State Department that is ran by vulture capitalists. We have a president who is a fraudulent real estate investor, stealing money from our US Treasury and putting it into his company. We have those vulture capitalists doing the same thing in every single department. They don't have experience. This is why they don't have experience in the departments that they're running, because they don't intend to do anything for that department. They intend to take that department and steal all the money for their companies and their stocks and their shareholders. We are in a corporate monarchy, and everyone's solution to it is to vote, which isn't working because now we've got politicians who have turned Congress into a monarchy where one man can prevent 49 states and even his own state's voice from getting through. It's whatever he wants. And they have the same thing happening in the House with the woman who is doing the same thing. And you can see that her husband has real estate conflicts of interest. So we are losing our company, and people are telling us that these are what we need. But the ones telling us that we need to have more trade, we need to have more manufacturing, are never had manufacturing experience. They do not work in the factories. They have no idea what it looks like. They have no idea how it works. And yet they're up there preaching at us that we can't have access to taxes, that we need to take this, we need to take our taxes and give them to a foreign company who's going to bring in their factory, which is actually the factory of a US corporation. So the factory that was overseas that the US corporation was abusing is coming to the US, and our tax money is paying for it. And that money is going to get siphoned out of the United States and go out of the country. And instead of looking up at the top at that, we're looking at the immigrants and blaming the poor people who are just trying to get away from the regimes that ended up creating, that the United States ended up creating because we did that to their countries. What is happening to us, we did to them. We have to stop this, or else we are going to lose and be the next third world toxic factory nation for the rest of the world. So what my company is, it's basically, I mean, ideally it was going to be a company that created conversations, taking my words, putting them onto products. And so those conversation pieces would allow you to relate to your neighbor, have these conversations, that in those conversations, the stereotypes that kept us apart would get destroyed. It's since morphed into a guerrilla army for the cyber war, spiritual war, and the psyops war, the psychological manipulation war, turning me into a guerrilla soldier of that. And also a corporate lobbyist for the 99%, the exploited around the world, and the all living kids. Everyone talks about the babies, the unborn babies, but not the living kids. And it's interesting how they care about the unborn babies, but then pull the funding from the living kids. We can't even feed them now lunch to make sure that they're not starving, that giving them a piece of bread is okay, or the sandwich is fine. I'm sorry, these are kids. These are American kids, and you're treating them like that. That same philosophy that I saw with US corporations treating the foreign workers, the factories, and the Chinese workers and Vietnam workers like crap and justifying it, is now being done to American kids. That exact same philosophy. Oh, well, they just need this. They don't need all this fancy stuff. They don't need to have a nutritious, healthy dinner. They don't need to have this. They're fine. At least they get to eat something. It's that same mentality is happening here that I heard there. And I've been following China for about 20 years because this is where my industry went. 2008, Bush took every manufacturing and just shoved it out of the US and outsourced everything. And now we have ghost towns. We have factory outlet ghost towns where thriving factories used to stand. The idea of Henry Ford of being able to pay your workers so they can support your company, that's all gone. It's all about shareholder value. And it's not even American shareholders anymore. It's foreign shareholders who are investing in our factories and in our companies, and eventually going to acquire them, especially if they're shareholders who are controlled by their government. So we have foreign government, state-owned enterprises of China who are investing in US companies. And if they gain enough power, they can acquire the companies, acquire the corporations. And since we have given corporations so much of our power as American people, they acquire that power too. Now we have foreign corporations and foreign government leaders able to influence and buy our politicians through their pro bono lobbying. And then since the FEC and the lobbying is not on the same jurisdiction, and I found this out because I wanted to be a pro bono lobbyist, but I also want to be a company that the people of the world would be able to feed my company through sales and products, and in that way would pay me as a CEO. And then I could take that money and then I could turn my company eventually into a factory or whatever, and then employ people, employ the artists, employ the doers. This is the plan. I wanted to make sure everything was ethical and honest and open and transparent as possible, which I got a lot of weird looks, from people going, why? Because that's who I am. That's what I wanted for my company. That's what I wanted to do. But this is how I learned. And so the FEC, the lobbying is not on the same jurisdiction. And so one agency doesn't know what the other is doing. So somebody can serve as a pro bono lobbyist for their corporation, and then their corporation can pay off the politician in a corporate PAC under elections. So it's a loophole. Technically they're not breaking the rules, but they are. They're bribing politicians through a loophole. And so I was like, okay, I'll turn myself into a pro bono corporate lobbyist backed by my own corporation, and I will be that pro bono corporate lobbyist for the exploited around the world, the America's 99%, and all living kids, doing exactly what they were doing, but for the good. And so that's the whole point of Redesign Your Thinking. That's why I'm doing these podcasts now. Kind of think of me as Alexander Hamilton of 1700s. He used the U.S. press. He used the New York newspaper to speak to the American people, to tell them exactly, this is what the U.S. Constitution is about. I know you're hearing a lot of this other stuff, a lot of conspiracy theories, but this is what it's about. So I'm taking that idea and revolutionizing it for modern day society, and using our podcasts and our available digital tech, whatever I can afford, which isn't much, using free services as much as possible, just like I did when I was a marketing specialist for Wolf Forwarding, and getting this information out to you. Because when you understand what's happening, then the exploited, I was exploited, you're probably exploited. A lot of us have been laid off. A lot of us lost our careers. A lot of us lost our money. I even was a guinea pig of the healthcare system, and that's a whole nother story. You can, I have that on SoundCloud under healthcare repair. You can hear my whole story on that. I was a very rare medical case when I was pregnant. Anyways, so taking everything that's happened to me as a negative and turning it into something positive. Everything happens for a reason, they say. So I believe it, and this is what I'm doing, and this is the information I'm giving to you. And when we come together, when the 99% who are down at the bottom come together, and we share our resources, we share our information, we tweet what we know. James Madison's instructions for getting rid of a faction in government is to extend the sphere. It's in Federalist 10. And if you go to SoundCloud, I need to post everything on. I think I need to just put everything onto my website. I've been trying out all these different mediums, and I just need to consolidate everything in one spot. If you go to redesignyourthinking.blog, I also have redesignyourthinking.com. So that is going to put you into .blog. And they're like, why would you do that? I like to elevate things that are seen beneath to a higher level. So even that .blog that people scoff at, I wanted to kind of give a better, a higher level to it. So that's why I did it. I probably was dumb, and it probably ended up hurting my whole idea of the company. But, I'm an artist, and so I'm a rebel, and I'm always defying the status quo and defying social norms. So that's what's happening. That's the information. That's my history. That's why I created my company, and that's what's going on.